When discussing horror in gaming, I can't think of another series where these two words are more synonymous than that of Silent Hill. As a series, Silent Hill changed not only the entire landscape for horror in the video game space, but continues to be a frightening and harrowing experience despite being over 20 years old. In past videos, we've discussed Resident Evil and how it's not actually quote-unquote scary, but the gameplay, setting, and mechanics all lead to a tense experience that triggers that same sort of dopamine that floods into our monkey brains. Silent Hill, however, oozes horror, and while I have some issues with aspects of the gameplay and the story, Silent Hill never ceased to create an atmosphere that kept me on edge up until the very end. In this next series of videos, we'll be looking at every game in the franchise, the good and the bad, and tracking the series' rise and subsequent fall from grace. And while I remain skeptical about the amount of new Silent Hill games we are about to receive here in the next couple of years, I'm still cautiously optimistic about what is to come as well. But as with every story must, let's begin with the first, the original Silent Hill from 1999 on PlayStation 1. If you enjoy this type of video essay and retrospective content, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And without further delay, let's crawl out of the car and walk our way into the mist-filled horrorscape that is Silent Hill. Begin with the opening of Silent Hill with a montage of cutscenes from the game where we see our protagonist Harry Mason and his daughter traveling on a mountain road. Mixed in with some other non sequitur scenes, Harry is passed by a cop, only to see her bike flipped over on the side when a figure walks into the middle of the road, causing Harry to crash. Waking up, Harry finds his daughter Cheryl to be missing, and wandering into the mist-covered, snow-ridden resort town of Silent Hill, he begins his search for Cheryl. From the beginning, it's clear that something is not right in this town, as the entire space seems completely abandoned, with the fog so dense it feels almost unnatural. While wandering the streets, Harry catches glimpses of a girl that seems to be Cheryl running away into the fog, and following her, Harry wanders into a back alley of the town, as sirens begin to blare in the background. The sky turns dark, and as Harry flicks on his lighter, the entire landscape has changed. Pavement has turned into metal grating, the walls a series of rusted chain link fences, all covered in nasty rust and grime. Once a quaint street with its concrete walls and snow-covered ground, it has turned into what looks to be more of an abandoned factory, full of rust and darkness. Hanging corpses and barbed wire give a sense of foreboding, this otherworld being more or less a land of death. The dichotomy here between the town and the otherworld is palpable, and this stark contrast gives a vast sense of unease to both Harry and the player. With no other choice, Harry presses onward, echoing metal footsteps following his path, surrounded by a cacophony of grinding metal, clanking steel, and screams and moans, further aiding to the sense of unease this new world works to instill. Approaching a hanging body, Harry is attacked by deformed childlike creatures, and despite his attempts to escape, is ultimately killed by the said creatures. This opening scene is a perfect encapsulation of the aesthetic and tone that Silent Hill seeks to achieve. While looking at this game's contemporaries and inspirations, that being Resident Evil, there is a reason why fans of horror even to this day hold Silent Hill in such high regard. Resident Evil sets its tone from the very beginning as well, with the full motion video cutscene of a zombie attack telling the player to explore the house to find a way to escape, and while at the time it is not known why there are zombies, the rest of the game is something most people would have seen before: a house, a laboratory, a garden, and the like. Silent Hill from the very beginning sets to build the horror intention in a much different means, that being the utilization of contrast, questions, and the unexplainable. And this is the theme that we will see in this game as well as further entries, that being contrast, horrific beasts, and the unexplained. Our setup to Silent Hill is why are we here and where is our daughter? A fear that any parent is sure to have. This is further compounded upon when the otherworld shows its head, and the differences between the quaint town located in Maine combined with the industrial hellscape that is the other side gives a sense of whiplash for the player. Combine that along with the hellish creature set out to murder you, and it's clear that Silent Hill is setting out to be gaming's first true horror experience. This comment came up in the Resident Evil videos a lot about the lack of horror in these games despite having the moniker of survival horror, and by all estimations I would agree. The term horror has a connotation, rightfully so, of being something horrifying or scary, and I would say that about 90% of all Resident Evil games I was never really that scared, minus maybe some parts in Resident Evil 7. Tense, yes, which has much of the same feeling but never actually scared. Silent Hill is authentically scary, even with these graphics in 2023. I remember dabbling in this game on release, but back then I was complete chicken shit and I would never actually finish a Silent Hill game until I was in my 20s. But color me impressed with the fact that this game has all the trappings of horror games today and still managed to make me jump or become deeply unsettled a number of times throughout this 7-hour experience. From your typical jump scares, unsettling characters we will meet in town, strange whispers and voices in the background, and that nerve-wracking white noise of the radio, everything in Silent Hill is determined to set you on edge, and it really works. Horror is built on tension and the explosive release of that said tension, but true horror goes deeper, more cerebral, making you question what's going on around you and what is actually happening. To me, nothing is more unsettling than Lisa, the nurse we've met in the Otherworld hospital. We will get to more of her story implications in the narrative section, but her entire premise is completely unsettling. Coming off as an innocent bystander to the world of Silent Hill, the questions begin during your first meeting, as the interaction occurs not only in a room that we were just starting in, but also in the Otherworld itself. We've met other characters up until this point, Delilah in the church, Sybil at the cafe, and Kaufman at the hospital, in fact the same room that we're in now. In these meetings, we were in the normal town of Silent Hill, covered in snow and dense in fog. So to see someone in the Otherworld already sets off with questions. It continues forward with her interactions with Harry, being concerned and cryptic as we continue our adventure. She slowly begins to become hopeless, pessimistic, and all over the place. All these interactions gave me an unsettling feeling that she was not as she seemed, which is inevitably true. Everything in Silent Hill is seemingly designed to ensure that the horror is at the forefront of this game, and it all begins with the location, like every good horror title. So let's dive into the town itself of Silent Hill.
Now listen to me. Before you pull the trigger, know who you're shooting. And don't do it unless you have to. And don't go blasting me by mistake. Got it?
Yeah, thanks.
The town of Silent Hill is a remote vacation town nestled somewhere in the state of Maine. And if there are two things we know about Maine, it's the fact that there's a lot of lobsters, and Stephen King loves himself some remote Maine towns as a setting for his novels. However, I do feel this location is perfect for tonality Konami was going for when building a horror game. The secluded nature of Silent Hill gives a sense of loneliness that few other locales can actually achieve, which is now why I probably understand why Stephen King loves the state so much. As a location, Silent Hill is on its face your typical remote town, a small footprint with buildings such as shops, schools, police station, and homes, all located on parallel running streets like any real town built in the 1980s in the United States. However, upon entering, you realize quickly that nothing in this town is actually right. Abandoned of people, we are beset upon by a number of mutated beasts, all of which announce themselves within their upcoming presence through feedback on the radio Harry carries around with him.
What's that? Huh. Radio. What's going on with that radio?
As a mechanic, this works on two levels. In practicality, it allows the player to know that there are enemies about to show up, to either allow the player to eliminate or evade their upcoming attacks. But on a tension and horror front, this simple use of sound is amazing. The static and white noise emanating from the radio is unsettling, a noise piercing through the fog of Silent Hill, announcing the looming threat hiding in the mists. In the inventory, you actually have the ability to turn the radio off, which is equally as eerie due to the vast silence as you roam the streets, with an even larger unknowns hidden from view. This is a testament to the world design of Silent Hill, that just roaming the streets is a creep factor on its own. For about a third of your time while playing through this game, you'll be spending it roaming the streets of Silent Hill, which Konami has masterfully built. To work within the limitations of the PlayStation 1, Team Silent encased the entire world in fog to allow for easier rendering of the world as you're moving through it. Giving the actual size of Silent Hill as a play space is actually pretty big. This is not only a smart design choice to keep game performance strong, but also is further aided in creating an ambiance and mystery that is Silent Hill. Keep in mind that this game is surprisingly large for the time, with the streets of Silent Hill being fully explorable, as well as many buildings that you don't even need to go into. And looking at the map, you can see every side street, alleyway, main street on the map, with it updating in real time when you find new shortcuts through houses, roads that are blocked off or are gone entirely. This also goes for internal maps as well, making these larger areas much easily explorable. Once again, the dichotomy of the real world and the other world work in tandem to create tension and unease as well. Every area we explore in Silent Hill has an otherworld variant to explore. A hellscape and nightmare compared to the seemingly normal world we start into, even though there's monsters in it. With its rusted, decaying industrial theme, it creates a stark divide, and couple that with the background noises of heavy bass, synthesizers, and notes being played slightly out of key, as well as the sounds of grinding metal in the background. Hear a lot about the original Silent Hill games is navigating through the world, as this game does operate on tank controls. While jarring to anyone who didn't grow up playing with these, I found myself falling right back into the flow state with it, having just played all of the old Resident Evil games on this channel recently. However, tank controls are used for an express purpose, that being the use of static camera angles. Silent Hill and its open spaces will allow you to pull the camera back behind Harry by holding in the left trigger. However, many times during the runtime of this game, the camera control is pulled away from you in lieu of a fixed camera angle, oftentimes in strange locations like on the top of the stairs, mounted sideways in a corner, or off-kiltered and crooked behind Harry as well. This use of static camera further leads to the tension and horror, as not only does the control of the camera get taken away from the player, but every time this happens, we get an angle that is just wrong, for lack of a better word. In looking at some of my favorite horror movies like It Follows and Smile and Hereditary, this camera trick is used in those as well, many shots being just slightly off-kilter, off-center, and unsettling, a trick which Silent Hill uses to great effect. We believe in symmetry as a form of beauty in the real world, and so when something is just not right, you can tend to feel it subliminally in your bones. Horror is a hard thing to create and get right, specifically the kind of horror that isn't just flat out in your face like something like Five Nights at Freddy's, but a deeper psychological horror that can rattle you to your bones, and Silent Hill has this in spades. It feels like everything in Silent Hill is meant to scare you, and with such a great world created by Team Silent and Konami, you can begin to see why this is one of the greats when it comes to horror in video games. With such a great world, we need to fill it with something, so it is here that Team Silent does falter for me a little bit, but still manages to create the seeds of something fantastic, that being enemies in combat. I wasn't necessarily sure where to put this in the video, but I think it's safe to say that the music of Silent Hill may be one of this series' best strong suits, even in games that were not as beloved as the ones made by Team Silent. Scoring for anything horror is a tough task, as it needs to convey a sense of unease, build up and tension, without drowning out the rest of the soundscape and visuals. I look to movies like Rosemary's Baby or a more contemporary movie that I keep bringing up, It Follows. In It Follows, Disasterpeace was able to weave a beautiful soundtrack, inspiring unease and tension throughout the entire movie, while also keeping to his original styles, as seen in games like Fez and Hyper Light Drifter, and making something both haunting and, in my opinion, pretty beautiful, all without taking away from what's actually happening in the movie. Side note, I did a whole interview with him on making music on this channel like 3 years ago, so go and check that out in the links down below. Silent Hill's composer Akira Yamaoka, I think I said that right, did the composition for almost the entire franchise, and it captures that same sound space I spoke of before, having obvious inspirations from classical pieces as well as music from the cult hit show Twin Peaks. The soundtrack for Silent Hill is a cacophony of sound that just works. From the slow moments to the tense moments in the other world, the plucking of the guitar, the heavy use of synthesizers and hard distorted bass sounds, all sounding just on the cusp of something out of key, creates a strange unease that I don't think has been matched in horror games ever since. There's a reason why Silent Hill soundtrack is so recognizable, and it even translates into other games that he has composed for, like Bloober Team's The Medium. His way of creating a beautifully haunting soundtrack is masterful. It really helped in cementing the style of Silent Hill. I'm not like a musical genius or anything like that, but it felt weird not to mention it at all. Just take a listen to both of these tracks. One when Harry wakes up in the cafe, and the other one in the final boss fight. The differences are stark, but both work together in building that style, that tension, and the flavor many remember from Silent Hill. Also, keep in mind, he did a remix for a Persona 4 Dancing All Night song. God, I love this fucking game. Anyway, sorry. Silent Hill is well known for its creature and enemy design, and while I feel that on the main this is true, the original Silent Hill did not fully hit the mark for me off the bat. However, while it's not my favorite by far, you can see the seeds sown here for later entries down the road, and for a first pass of making some cool and disturbing enemies, it's not too bad. It doesn't help that all of these were the first truly 3D modeled horror games at the time. If there's one thing we've learned from the PlayStation 1 era, is that these 3D textures for characters, places, and enemies don't hold up nearly as well as our our sprite-based predecessors from before. Our first introductions are to the weird deformed children with knives that we saw before, also known as the Grey Children. These small, blobby-looking bastards are the guys who killed Harry in the alleyway and are able to slice you up while also grabbing Harry's ankles and stabbing him some more. Once out in the world though, the two creatures we will face the most is the aerial chasing air screamer, a pterodactyl-looking beast who is seemingly relentless in the chase for blood, and the groaners, or what essentially amounts to demon dogs. This is where the radio comes in handy as well, as each type of enemy has their own sound of static, so the discerning player can figure out what is actually chasing them based off the static given by the radio. By far the creepiest enemies though would have to be the puppet nurses, located in the hospital as well as at the end zone in the final level of the game. These humanoid creatures are by far the most disturbing due purely to their movements. With their appendages moving in unnatural ways, as well as the way that they run, move, and stand, these creatures are by far the creepiest due to their unnatural body positionings, whereas also being something so close to being a human. The nurse motif will continue forward in future games, almost as an iconic enemy design for Silent Hill games yet to come. We also have the mumblers who groan when they chase you with their gorilla legs, not to mention towards the end of the game where all of these creatures get pretty souped up. The dogs having worms coming out of their heads and the flyers becoming more dinosaur-like and much more aggressive. The boss design in Silent Hill, however, leaves a bit to be desired. I'm not sure why old PlayStation 1 horror games decided to have massive animals as cool boss designs, but we have that for a majority of them here in Silent Hill as well. The Crosshead is essentially just a giant lizard with, you guessed it, a crossed head. We have a larva in some sand that eventually turns into a giant moth later down the road. For the most part, I found these fights pretty simple and honestly boring, that being run across the room, shoot some rounds as they approach, rinse and repeat. We do have a fight with the main character later, but we could save that for the story section. And then the final boss, which is a neat design as it is something a bit more demonic, creepy looking, but by the time you reach that point in the game, you're already so flushed with heals and ammo, allowing you to just tank the hits and keep blasting away until they die. Now, I'm not looking for any Souls-like fights here or anything like that, but when you think of bosses, challenge and interesting design tend to come up into the conversation, and to me the bosses here are honestly just lacking. Combat is pretty straightforward as well, and if I'm being honest, that is not necessarily a bad thing given where it seems that Team Silent put a lot of their focus, which was on puzzles rather than combat. You have the options for both melee and firearms, with both options having multiple weapons. Both methods basically involve simply holding the right trigger and hitting X to fire around or swing your melee weapon. Melee is super important in Silent Hill as ammo at the start of the game is few and far between. Starting with a knife, you will progressively find new weapons along the way, such as the steel pipe and the hammer, all of which do subsequently more damage. Timing is key to your swings, as there is a wind up for each hit as well as a recovery time between swings that leave you open for attacks, and with enemies like the dogs who lunge at you constantly, it can be tough to connect an actual hit. You also find a variety of firearms as well, like the pistol, shotgun, and hunting rifle. All of these are used in the way that you think they are. Rifles for long range high damage, shotguns for up close and personal, and pistols as a more filler weapon if you're trying to save ammo for the other two. I do think the ammo economy is a bit out of control by the end of the game, however, seeing as how I had hundreds of rounds of everything on me. I reached the end boss, and this may be due to the amount of exploration I did in Silent Hill, but it just felt like way more than I needed. As mentioned before, this game is large and with a ton of health items and ammos to find around the world, but with that exploration comes a degree of risk. Enemies are everywhere and seemingly never ending, so any further amount that you explore the streets of the town is just that much more of an opportunity to waste some rounds of ammo, waste some health, or potentially die. Inventory management isn't really a thing here like it was in games like Resident Evil, as everything just appears in one row on the start menu and there is seemingly no limit to the amount of items you can actually carry. But while combat is a bit simple, the puzzles in Silent Hill are actually really good. This game relies heavily on puzzles to solve in order to find keys or key items you'll need to move forward. Some of these are logic based, some are riddles meant to be solved, and some are just simple item interactions, but all of them rely on a degree of thought. Take the piano puzzle for example. You are met with a piano with interactable keys. Most of these play notes, but a few make a strange plunking sound. Exploring the room a bit, you find a poem regarding 5 birds that couldn't sing, describing their flight of migrating birds and the order in which they flew. You begin to garner the keys you're supposed to hit by the color order of the birds, and with the poem being titled A Tale of Birds with No Voice, you garner that this may be the keys that make no sound. Pressing those keys in the order of the poem unlocks the piano to get your item inside and skedaddle. There are a lot like these, ones involving pictures of zodiac signs, where you need to look at the right appendages for what number to press, pictures that expose symbols once you flash paintings with the camera, and more. Puzzles are a key aspect in Silent Hill, and while some can be frustrating and mildly convoluted, it was a nice break from the action and fear to challenge my mind a bit. The world itself also becomes a puzzle of sorts, finding your way through each area, unlocking doors, pushing cabinets, and the like. What further breeds tension mentioned in the other world is the fact that once you figured out an area in the Mist world, its items, and unlocked all the doors, the world shifts into the other space, changing the layout, doors, and locks you will need as well. Paths you've taken are no longer usable, doors that were open are now locked, and vice versa. This change of location not only exists to stump the player, a puzzle box in and of itself, but it also keeps the player on their toes, as now what we knew is no longer. Again, attempting to ensure that the player, as well as Harry, is never at ease with the world around them. It feels like you're trapped in a house of mirrors that you see at carnivals, but with the added conundrum of murderous demons roaming the halls to, well, murder you. All of this comes together in the final area, known as the Nowhere, where this area is a veritable maze, an amalgamation of all the areas we've been to thus far. The hospital, the school, the antique store, and more. Doors lead to random rooms, hallways lead to new areas, and with no map to help, the feeling of seclusion, confusion, and isolation begin to seep in. A palpable fear for myself, being trapped in a monster-filled hellscape. Silent Hill, from its world, level design, mechanics, and ambiance, are all built to serve one purpose: to frighten the player in every way possible. There are jump scares, yes, but there is much more to Silent Hill that brings dread and unease to the player, and even 24 years later, this game still conveys the same feelings it did in 1999 for me. While graphically it does look, well, aged, the look and feel of Silent Hill still holds strong, and is a must-play for any fans looking to get into the series or horror video games as a whole. But what really keeps players talking about this game is the story, coupled with everything else that we've spoke about thus far. This one is deep, so we will be looking at the events of the game, then get behind the meaning of it, including the multiple endings. So if you've made it this far and anything here has intrigued you, you should just go play it yourself and bow out now before this story gets spoiled, as I do believe that this one is best experienced fresh and with no prior knowledge. So let's get into the story of Silent Hill. Back into where we started. After the encounter in the Otherworld alley, Harry wakes up lying in a booth in a local cafe. Besides him sits a policewoman, Sybil, the woman who we saw on the bike before the crash. Hailing from the next town over, she seems equally as confused about the whole scenario and is looking to escape to call reinforcements. Harry asks if she has seen his daughter, and after some back and forth about what happened, Sybil hands Harry her firearm and ventures into the fog in order to find a way to escape. Armed with a knife, pistol, flashlight, and radio, and after killing one of our first monster flyers, Harry ventures into the town as well.
Over by a truck. But I'm alright, I guess.
Glad to hear it. You from around here? Why don't you tell me what happened?
Wait a second, I'm just a tourist. I came here for a vacation. I just got here.
Heading back to the alley he was at before, as it was the last place that he had seen Cheryl. The alley has returned to normal, and at the end of it, there's a piece of paper torn from Cheryl's notebook, which reads, "To school," an obvious clue. Harry makes his way towards Midwich Elementary, cutting through the local house due to the destruction of both roads leading to the school. Upon exiting the house, the sky is black, the snow is gone, and in the darkness, Harry makes his way inside. The school is deserted, yet also full of gray children that we met before. And making his way through, Harry begins to solve puzzles in order to gain medallions to unlock the clock tower. Upon entering, however, he appears on the other side, now in the other world of the school, and sees a giant ritualistic emblem drawn upon the ground in the courtyard.
Have I been here before? I don't remember this being here before.
Again, making his way through the shifted school, we make our way to the boiler room to turn on some power, where we see a suspended corpse on fire, illuminating the beast within, the Splithead. Upon his defeat, the sirens blare once more, and the world shifts back to normal. Well, not really normal, but the version closest to normal, where we see a girl with black hair leaning on a boiler until she vanishes. Confused, Harry heads outside, hearing the ringing of church bells in the distance, and seeing how someone needs to be operating said bells, he heads towards the church to meet Delilah Gillespie, who is praying at the altar. Speaking in riddles, mentioning the return of demons, that Harry is too late and hands him an object she calls the Florus.
I knew you'd come. You want the girl, right?
The girl? You're talking about Cheryl.
I see everything.
You know something. Tell me.
There's a lot of real-world references to the occult in Silent Hill, with much of the verbiage and iconography being closely tied to books like the Talmud, as well as references to ancient Egyptian mythology and Christianity. The amount of references would be an entire video in its own right, so if you want something like that on this channel, let me know in the comments down below. I just wanted to comment on the attention to detail here, as it is fairly impressive, as it would be easy just to make up some mumbo-jumbo and make it sound like lore in the world of Silent Hill, but with the grounded set in reality, it's a nice touch. Delilah tells Harry to rush to the hospital and disappears, so listening like any good man will, Harry heads to the hospital, crossing the drawbridge into the next district of Silent Hill, that being the shopping district. Entering the hospital, we meet another real human, Kaufman, a doctor from the hospital, who is standing over his own demon kill. After taking a pot shot at Harry, the two comment on what the hell is happening in this town. When Kaufman takes his leave, Harry explores the hospital to find it completely devoid of any life, human or monster. Entering the director's office, Harry finds a strange red liquid on the floor. It is here we will deviate, as this is one of the key points you need to decide the ending you will receive. And for the purposes of this video breakdown, we will be going through the good plus ending, but keep in mind all this for the end. We collect the strange liquid in a water bottle, and then we make our way into the basement, where we find a strange bed and a picture of a girl with black hair on the stand next to it, who looks strangely like the girl we saw at the school. The hospital does another shift into the other world, and Harry makes his way back to the front of the hospital, battling the puppet nurses along the way. In one of the rooms, we find a VHS player and a tape, where upon playing it, we see nothing but static and snips of semi-coherent words, but it's more or less a garbled mess. In the same room where we met Kaufman, we run into Lisa, the nurse we spoke of earlier, who is hiding under a desk. She says that she passed out and woken up in the hospital of the other world and was so lost and confused that she decided to just hide. Harry asked her if she knew what was going on in the basement, where Lisa explains that they were all under strict orders not to go down there. As Harry tries to pour more information about the town out of her, the world shifts again, going back into the world of fog, with Lisa nowhere to be seen. Instead, we meet Delilah again, who says that you're late and tells you to head to the antique store to find the other church. She also says that the mark of Samael is appearing all over town, and if completed, the darkness will devour the entire town of Silent Hill. It's here that you begin to wonder, wow, a lot's happening and nothing is really being explained, just a bunch of riddles and garbled words. And I believe this was intentional in the way of storytelling for multiple reasons. A, confusion, as we spoke of before, once again breeds a sense of unease to most, confused by what's happening in the events of the world around them. Who is Lisa? Why is she in the other world? What is the other world? Where's our kid? Why does Delilah seemingly know a ton about what's going on, and why won't she just stop and explain a single goddamn thing? But this does begin to sow the seeds for the answers to come, as all of this will play a larger role by the end of the game. An astute player may have already solved the mystery behind Lisa. Others may not have picked up on the clues there at all. That is what I find most brilliant about the storytelling in Silent Hill. There are a ton of clues and bits of information littered about the scenes in the world that allow the player to begin to just kind of think for themselves, piece it together, the lore and the world that we're in, without the game specifically just straight out telling you. But back to it. Harry heads to the antique store, finding a shelf that looks like it had been moved recently. As he begins to crawl through the hole, Sybil shows up and the two catch up. She tells Harry that all the roads are blocked or destroyed, and Harry asks if she had seen Cheryl anywhere in her exploration. Sybil says she had seen a girl, but what she saw couldn't be reality, as she was just kind of walking across the lake, which obviously is impossible. Thus, Harry needs to find a way across the lake.
I try to make sense of it, but then my mind goes blank. Everything's dark there, and I hear sirens in the distance. I met this nurse, Lisa. It's like I was there, but not really. It's all a blur, like some kind of hallucination, you know?
I have no idea what you're talking about, Harry.
Entering the hole, we find a strange altar within, and as we leave to reunite with Sybil, who stands guard outside, the world shifts again, taking Harry to the other side, where to Sybil, he just disappears.
Harry.
Harry determines that Lisa might know a way to cross the lake and heads back into the hospital. And on the way, we fight that larva boss in Town Hall, which is pretty much a sleeper, but we get a hunting rifle out of it, which is pretty cool. Upon reuniting, Lisa tells Harry that there may be a way through the waterworks by the school, but begs him to stay with her as she's absolutely piss scared. Harry refuses as he's a dad and has a daughter to save, but offers to take her with him. But she retorts that she has a feeling that she's not supposed to leave the hospital for whatever reason. A feeling she has. Another clue, perhaps. Harry makes his way through the other world to the only path that's open. The moth boss from earlier appears and we also proceed to murder it. After its demise, the world returns to the fog world and Harry heads into the waterways and into the sewers. As you can imagine, the sewers are a creepy place with hanging blade monsters littering the tunnels, and as Harry emerges, he is now on the other side. It is here that we have another branch to pull on in regards to what ending we get, as we can enter the hotel and save Kaufman from some monsters, leading us down a path to finding drugs in a safe, all ending with finding a bottle of the same red liquid we found in the hospital stashed away in the motorcycle gas tank. Kaufman barges in, yells at Harry, takes the bottle, and leaves, leaving Harry to just assume this had something to do with all the drug smuggling and decides to just let it go, that it was just a waste of time.
Give me that.
What is this?
That's none of your business. Instead of messing with that, how about coming up with a way to get out of here? You shouldn't be hanging around here goofing off. What do you think you're doing? You want to get yourself killed? Get out of here.
Okay, take it easy.
Unless you want to die, keep your mind on business. Got it?
Enjoyed this side quest a lot, as it's really the only side quest that we get in this game, taking you all around the resort area into multitudes of different locked buildings to explore, while also leading you to more health and ammo items as well. There's also a ton of lore and readables in here that I really do think is worth exploring. I do wish that we had gotten more side tangents like this one to further flesh out Silent Hill before the monsters came to pass. But even having one, I mean, hell, I'll take it. Making his way to the boat, the world shifts again, the other world sirens blaring in the background. Harry muses that this time feels different, like the nightmare is blending with reality and that this must be an omen of something real bad to come. Boy, is he right. Reaching the boat, we find Sybil inside, now having been brought to the other world as well. Obviously confused, the two muse about what's happening. Harry believes that the real world is being invaded by a dark entity. Machinations of another nightmarish delusions essentially come to life. He believes that this darkness was created by someone, and Cheryl is stuck in it as well.
Under whoever created this darkness, Cheryl is somewhere and she needs my help.
Harry, this whole thing's been a major blow to you. You need to rest.
Sybil,
Delilah barges in on this reunion, saying that the ritual is almost complete and the sigils of Samael have appeared in the amusement park and on top of the lighthouse. Sybil and Harry split, she going to the amusement park and Harry going to the lighthouse. Running through the otherworld streets, dodging monsters along the way, we reach the top of the lighthouse and it's clear that we are too late, as the same symbol seen at the school with Alyssa has appeared on top of the lighthouse and is now glowing. Alyssa is also there, disappearing as he arrives. We get a cutscene with Sybil being attacked by an unknown entity, and Harry heads back to the amusement park after he realizes that Sybil hasn't returned to the boat. We head through the sewers once more and appear at the amusement park. I have to say this may be one of the creepiest areas in the game, the otherworld having completely taken over, being thrust into darkness, following the distorted sounds of a merry-go-round at the distance. We find Sybil completely out of it as she pulls a gun on Harry. Again, this is an inflection point for the ending. We can either kill her, which is a kind of difficult fight, or we can save her by using the liquid from the bottle we found at the hospital on her. Doing so keeps her her alive, as the liquid seems to kill some sort of parasite that has been put inside of her, allowing her to live until the very end. I do have an issue with this, as maybe I missed something, but it was unclear to me how any player is meant to know when to use this. Up until this point, you were told that it's a mysterious liquid that we put in a random bottle, so without word of mouth or the internet, it is unclear how a player is meant to know how and when to use it. If there is a way and I just completely missed it, let me know in the comments down below, as I could have just missed it entirely and, whoops. In this run though, we will save her, and upon doing so, get a major bomb drop that Harry has been holding out on us this entire time. He tells how Cheryl isn't his real biological daughter, that he and his late wife had found her on the side of the road and taking her in to raise her. He also says that it was Cheryl's idea to come here, to Silent Hill, and he never really knew why that was in the first place.
But Cheryl isn't my biological daughter. I actually haven't told her yet. She probably already knows anyway, though. We found her abandoned on the side of the highway. Nobody knew where she came from. We didn't have any kids of our own. My wife was sick, and it didn't look like she was getting any better. So we took Cheryl in.
So in that case...
there might be some connection between Cheryl and this town.
So what do you do now?
Cheryl is my daughter. I will save her no matter what.
Alessa appears, and in the struggle, Harry uses the flowers to trap Alessa inside, where Dahlia reveals her true plan in capturing Alessa, revealing the fact that she is in fact her daughter, who had been caught in a house fire long ago. This begins to make things become a bit more clear, like why there was a picture of her at the bedside of the hospital, why we keep seeing her everywhere. She is the one who has been manifesting the other world into existence. With Alessa's powers now out of control, Harry passes out and awakens in the middle of what we call the nowhere, an amalgamation of the multiple other worlds we have been in thus far. Making our way through the maze of confusing doors, locked rooms, and puzzles, we are working to find 5 talismans to open up Alessa's room where she is actually located. Along the way, we meet the most tragic part of our story, the finale of Lisa, the nurse. She is distraught and yet vacant. She tells you she knows what is wrong, that she went to the basement and now remembers everything. She knows that she is one of them, the monsters, and she is about to die. She pleads with Harry to stay with her as blood begins to spill from her eyes, her mouth, her hair, everywhere. Harry, obviously distraught because holy shit, this would be creepy, runs, holding the door behind him as Lisa pleads on the other side for sympathy, for companionship. Harry gives it, but from the other side of the door. This scene is harrowing and truly sad, as it all hits home if Harry goes back into the room, reading the diary left upon the floor. Lisa recounting that she was the one taking care of Alessa in the basement, changing her bandages and staving off random bugs that kept finding their way inside.
Lisa.
If we view the videotape that we watched in the hospital again here in the nowhere, it all comes into more focus. Lisa admitting to changing the bandages, blood and pus oozing from the burns, and seemingly doing so under some sort of duress, saying that she would never tell a soul about what was going on in the basement. This also explains why she was unable to leave the hospital during the runtime of the game, trapped in a hellscape as one of the monsters, dead but never knowing it. Lisa's story ends with her eventual death, seemingly happy that it was coming to an end, and if you had picked up on the slight clues along the way, away, always appearing in the other world, not able to leave the hospital, you begin to see where her story could potentially end up. But even still, seeing the blood pouring from her body, it's a harrowing scene and one that will stick with me for a really long time. It's creepy and yet strangely beautiful, and it's hard not to admire the scoring and 3D rendering this scene shows off. Continuing further, we see a scene of Delilah, Kaufman, and 2 other doctors hovering over Alessa's burnt body, discussing her rebirth as some sort of god, and from here we reach the final room. We meet Delilah, Sybil, since we saved her, and a figure wrapped in bandages in a wheelchair. We learn that 5 years ago, Delilah began using her daughter Alessa as a host to bring about the god of her cult, sacrificing her own flesh and blood for the cause. However, in some sort of defense, Alessa's soul split in 2, birthing Cheryl, whom Harry found on the side of the road. The 2 girls then fuse together to become what's known as the incubator, and depending on what ending, we get one of 2 outcomes. Either Kaufman comes in, throwing the red bottle we found in the newly formed Alessa Cheryl hybrid, spawning the incubus from its back before getting knocked away. If Kaufman does not come, we fight the incubator. Regardless, the beast murders Delilah and the fight ensues. Once again, kind of a cakewalk. After the beast goes down, we have finished Silent Hill, and we get an ending depending on the choices we made in saving Kaufman and finding the red bottle, and if we save Sybil or not. Good Plus requires both to live, in which we see the incubator hand Harry a child and shows the 3 survivors the way out. While escaping though, Lisa appears and drags Kaufman back to the destruction, as he is the one who basically kept her enslaved at the hospital, using the drugs he was peddling as a lure for her. Sybil and Harry escape, staring at the baby, and we fade to black. Sidebar, I can't believe this was a scene they showed at the opening of the game. For the good ending, Sybil must die, and the events are the same. However, Harry's escape leads him now on the highway, holding a child and staring at the sky, seemingly in disbelief at everything that's happened. We then have the Bad Plus ending where Kaufman dies in the hotel, but Sybil is saved. We fight the incubator. Upon its defeat, turns back into Cheryl, thanking Harry as she fades away, seemingly now dead, the other world collapsing around him. Harry's in disbelief at the ending of his child, and while he wallows in his own pity, Sybil slaps him and tells him to leave as the world crashes around them, leaving their fates unknown. Finally, we have the bad ending, where no one lives, literally. After the goodbye from Cheryl and Harry falls to his knees, we see blood stemming from his head, still in his Jeep, now dead. The idea here seemingly is that all of these events were just a dream, conjured by Harry's dying brain while it fades into, dying. It is kind of funny how this ending was seemingly foreshadowed in the game as well, as he wonders at one point if everything occurring here was really just a dream he was having. There is also a secret ending you can get in New Game Plus where aliens land and abduct Harry as he asks if they know where his daughter is. This one's obviously a joke ending, but a fun Easter egg nonetheless. There's a ton of debate about which ending is canon, and I feel like I need to weigh in on this, although I feel like it's pretty obvious. Now, given what we know about characters to come in later Silent Hill games, that neither bad endings could be truly canon, although there's a large part of me that wishes that the ending where Harry was dead was actually the true one. But given how we never see Sybil again, this would lead one to believe that the good ending is true, where it's just Harry and his now child escaping Silent Hill. But just because she does not appear in the later games doesn't mean she's dead, so I have to say, just for the feel goods, I do think that the good plus ending is the canon one. But that is what makes Silent Hill so special, is that the game's narrative leaves a lot to glean from to allow you to come to your own choices and decisions. The entire game leaves a lot of ambiguity, and a lot of this game is frankly confusing. This I feel was by design, as I mentioned before, as that not knowing what the true events really are and what they mean does lead to that sort of apprehension I spoke about earlier. I do feel that the entire plot does go off the rails a bit at the end, what with the god being reborn and the still unexplained red goo in a bottle, but overall I think that the story of Silent Hill does exactly what it needs to do. That bringing the player into an extremely creepy world gives said player a set of mysteries that would play on some people's emotions, that being having your child missing after a car crash, and playing on that feeling like a rat trapped in a cage. The story and the world work in tandem to create confusion, fear, and worry. Sometimes frustration, but that just comes with the territory. Silent Hill attempts to hook its claws in you from the very beginning, and never lets go until you've been sufficiently disturbed. And while I have some gripes, like the ghost girl's body being split in two to prevent a demon god from returning, there's a solid blueprint constructed here that Team Silent would build upon. This was my first time actually beating this game all the way through, and I was amazed by how well Silent Hill still holds up at the time of recording this in 2023. While the visuals are muddy and the voice acting is questionable, there is still a ton of love here, and Silent Hill, in playing it again, you can see where many sensibilities of modern horror games come from, all stemming from this series. To me, this game is a must play, but with an expensive price tag on physical copies, it can be a bit difficult unless you use emulation, like I did for the footage capture here. But what did you you guys think about Silent Hill. Let me know in the comments down below, as I'm actively always in there, so let's have a discussion. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more content like this, and consider becoming a member in the link down below. I'll see you guys in the next one for round 2, that being the beloved Silent Hill 2. That's it for me, guys, and until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.